A very warm welcome to the final session of the day. I'm very pleased to say it's only an hour, not an hour and a half. That's the good news. The bad news is you've only got me. I haven't got any support or help. Barry's asked me to please give it a high-octane performance, so I'm going to do my best to do that. Please ask me questions as we go. Of course, we can take questions at the end, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose some questions and some challenges about the way that we've thought about measurement in the past and how it might not fit with social media. And then I'm going to put forward some suggestions of what we should do going forward, and also the work that my Amex social media measurement group has done, largely led by Bartholomew, towards a new framework, which we'll be seeing more of on Friday, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek into some of that today. So I'm Richard Bagnall. Until last Friday, I was at Gorkana, and I left then. I'm now, I guess, independent, but I was the MD and first employee of Metrica. Metrica, we sold to Gorkana 3 and a bit years ago, and I've now decided it's time to look at other opportunities. My first day at Gorkana, I felt very much like a new boy at school, and here I am in the office, and this chap here is Mr. William Durrance, who's the founder of the Durrance media monitoring business, which is a part of the Durrance group. I thought it might be Charles Darwin when I first saw him. But I was talking to Jeremy, the chief executive, and he said, oh, you've got to see this. And he had this frame with these clips here. And what we've got in this frame is 120 years of media monitoring innovation. So the clip in the top left is an original clip from 1880, 120 years ago, and then they're sort of timed over a number of years until we got to about 2002, I think that clip is. And what you can see is the innovation. We innovated quite a lot. We changed the background color of the paper and maybe changed the type font a little bit as well. But for 120 years, this is how the industry was. It was very static, very much the same. And back in the mid-90s, before I founded Metrica, incidentally, I should just explain, I used to work in PR. I used to work at a PR agency as well as in-house, and I used to sometimes have to measure my campaigns, and I used to get awfully confused trying to use some of the systems that were around in those days. So we started Metrica in the mid-1990s, and the way that the world worked was that Durrance and Remike and Curtis and the other names of the measurement of the monitoring world used to send us the clips, and they used to come in these envelopes. And those of you who've worked in PR might remember opening these envelopes and being showered in clips. And this actually used to be my first metric of success as a small business that we were growing at Metrica. How big our post bag got. Every day that the clips, we got sent more clips, the happier I was, because of course every clip that we analysed represented more revenue for us to make. And the fact is that measurement back in those days was really very simple, and any PR person really could have created their own measurement system. And of course I stand here in front of my peer group, and many of us did. So we looked at the type of things that were available to analyse in the content and worked out ways to measure it. So for years, I'm sure many of you would have loved to see this next slide. I'm happy to share it now. It is a price list from Metrica in 1998. And it's the end of a presentation that we did, and it lists some of the metrics that we used to offer to a client, and it lists the different price points as well. A bonus point, anyone can recognize this logo. Does anyone recognize that logo down there? It is, of course, America Online, who we were pitching to on this particular day. And I'm sure if you, I'll read a few out. We've got favorability, we've got brands, we've got messages, we've got share a shout, journalists, issues, publications, all the sort of metrics that all of us in here would recognize. Interesting thing, I think, as well on there is the price points. I don't know what you feel with your businesses, but you can see that our cheapest price point was £2.30 per clip, and our more expensive was £2.80, and I think the prices have gone up and they've started to come back down again. And the fact is, most of my competitors in those days, and some of them are good friends now and are in this room, we were all offering very similar type of metrics. And the way that the industry tried to differentiate itself was really by looking at different proprietary tools that it could offer. And so you got a wealth of this type of stuff, and we heard the clients in the session I was in last time talking about the confusion that some of these scoring systems cause people. Of course, they're great for us because they're proprietary and they're unique to us. They allow us to position ourselves as having done a lot of research. But I think if we're honest, and I think now is the time for honesty, a lot of us know that all of them are flawed in some shape or form. So these scoring systems, I feel very strongly, are largely responsible for a large proportion of what has confused the marketplace and turned it off measurement. It's not the language of the boardroom, it's not the language of business, it's very much the language of PR measurement, and it's the reason why the lady from the Cleveland Medical Center in the session before said that can we please stop confusing the hell out of her and help her understand what it is that she's really achieving. So I think if we say, well, okay, well, let's think about that. How do we think about it differently? Well, let's break down what public relations actually is. Many people have a definition of PR, the IPR, the CIPR, the PRCA, the PRSA. I think one's being crowdsourced. This is Bagnall's definition of PR, and I think it's pretty good. Basically, if we boil it down, the purpose of PR is to communicate the right message to the right target audience, this being a hugely important bit, this being a sort of nice to have at the right time and in the right medium, in the right publication. And then this being the most important bit, which is to achieve an objective. So what do we mean by an objective? Well, we all know that objectives are different for each and every client that we work with. So some of them it might be about changing awareness, and some of them it might be about driving sales or hits or footfall and that type of stuff. Now, the thing is that all of these objectives are what we call outcomes. I've heard it questioned earlier today, oh, I get confused, what's an outcome, what's an output? Well, nice and simple, outputs, outtakes, and outcomes. Outputs is what the PR people do. It starts with the media relations work, the press releases, the phone calls, selling the story into the journalists. But of course, it goes through to the content that is generated. In the old days, just the paper-based clips, of course now perhaps the online clips as well. Outtake is what has now happened in terms of what does the audience who's seen this content now think about it. An outcome is what have they now done about it. So it's really as simple as that. And we know that this is where businesses want to be over on these two, but we were all stuck down here measuring just the outputs. And that's why, we're stuck in these proprietary scores, and it wasn't really going anywhere. And I think, Amek, Barry, David Rockland, a lot of the people have done, that you all know, have done a huge amount of work to bring the industry forward. And I think back in 2009, wasn't it, that we're in Spain again, and we're in Barcelona. And we came together as an industry, and we declared the Barcelona Principle. So there were 7 of them, and just a reminder of what they are, here they are. And when I talk at conferences with a PR audience, I say, look, they're really quite basic, these things. They're designed to keep a basic level of how to think about measurement on a global basis. Of course, they are hailed, hopefully, as the death knell of advertising value equivalence. But really what we're doing here is we're asking people to think about measuring outcomes more than output. So look at number 2 here. Measuring the output, the effect on outcome is preferred to measuring media results. We want to be transparent and replicable. It's paramount. I think this is important in terms of the education that we all need to give to the industry. So it seemed, this is back in 2009, that great things were going to happen and that we're coming together as an industry, and we were going to all start to move towards measuring outtakes and outcomes, and that was all going to be happy. But I worry that we are at risk of being bombed back into the dark ages by the way things are changing so fast at the moment. A lot of us in this room, for whatever reason, didn't see the changes that were happening with online and social media coming quick enough. And while we were trying to educate clients about outtakes and outcomes and monitoring our clips and analysing the mainstream media, the world was changing all around us. And social and digital was really taking off. And clients wanted to know what this meant for them and what was happening. And I was lucky at Metrica. We were retained by Dell on a global basis and I was actually in Round Rock with them in Texas when Del Hell erupted. And I expect a lot of you have heard about Del Hell. It's a very famous case study of the first social media crisis that really happened. Dell had asked us to monitor and measure their online media content only, but no blogs. We'd said to them, do you want us to look at blogs? They said no. This is back in 2005, 2006. Blogs are really just strange men in their bedroom typing out their diary. Why would we be interested in that? Of course, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter didn't exist. I didn't say to them, what, you don't want social media? We just accepted it. That seemed a perfectly rational decision. And then, of course, Jeff Jarvis posted on his blog, The Buzz Machine, an article which snowballed and became the first social media crisis. And it woke brands up to the power of this social and online media. But I don't think it really woke us up to it. And into this vacuum stepped a huge number of software as a service organizations. So we all know their names. A lot of us, I expect, get our social media content fed to us by them now. But there's over 226 of these companies, according to Ken Burberry, who keeps a wiki of the providers. I'm sure many of your businesses will be found on there. But a lot of them stole early mover advantage. They had big budgets, big marketing spend, and they became omnipresent. And people thought, I need to know about social media, I need to do the listening. So at first they were listening tools, and then of course they started to ask more questions than that answered. So the social media companies started adding analytics in. And they made the fatal mistake of capturing the stuff that's easy to capture and putting that out into charts. But of course we all know in this room that that's not how to measure PR properly. We've all heard it many times today. We're going to hear it again and again and again. You've got to understand your client's objectives. Different clients' objectives are different. To measure those objectives, it's not necessarily how many tweets or likes or retweets there were. It's got to be about more than that in social media. But these charts, because they're software as a service companies, they're built by a company that's building it once, selling it many times. By definition, it can't be tailored easily to the customers. So I say, look, this stuff is really, it's pretty dashboards, it's what I like to call chart porn, and it needs to be taken with a huge amount of caution and you know, use it appropriately. But it's worse than this. It's worse than this. So one big challenge is consistency. When we were bought by Gorkana, I was in the happy position now of having spent 20 years selling to people. I was now able to put out an RFP from a position of strength. They phrase that correctly, they have about 4,000 clients. And I was able to send out an RFP to the different monitoring companies and say, look, we'd like to re-tender our social media monitoring business. We didn't want to be a monitoring company. We wanted to, on the social media front, we wanted to get in and look at the analytics and help our clients understand what it meant. So I sent this out to all of the usual suspects, and I told them all, I said, we're going to do this for 2 weeks. We gave them a very complex search string, and we said, just want you to fill our boots, send us every piece of content that's relevant to this search string, and then my team's going to look at it, we're going to analyze it, we're going to dive into it, and we're going to assess everybody on a grid that we'd come up with to see who would be the best provider for us going forward. And we took 3 companies to the final stage. And I'm not going to tell you who they were or who performed best or who performed worst, but I'm going to tell you some of the differences that we found. So the same search string from 3 of the leading providers. So the company that found the most content found 451,000 posts from this 2-week period. The company that found the least found 281,000 posts. Piece of content. So the middle company, 358. So what if we're going to report a number to our client, which of those numbers is right? Incidentally, 2 of the companies had system outages during that 2-week period, which we knew because we had a feed coming into us. But if you're looking at their platform, you might never have known. When we looked at the relevance of the content, we found that on average, only 40% of the content was relevant. When we took all of the content together, so the 451, the 358, 281,000 posts, and added it together, and then said, how much of this has been found by everyone? Okay, only 20% of the content had been found by all three providers. When we looked at the speed, we found that on average, the fastest provider was getting content to us in about 2 hours, and the slowest was taking over 24 hours. Now, if you're a PR person, of course, one of the reasons you want an automated tool is to help you to be aware of potential crises and opportunities in as close to real time as possible. If this content's taking nearly 20 or over 24 hours to come to you, that's no good. When we looked at media types, so were they YouTube, videos, social networks, blogs, microblogs, that type of stuff, we found that they all varied massively. And then the sentiment was huge discrepancy as well. So we checked. What we did was we got 3 analysts to reanalyze 500 pieces of content by each of these 3 companies. And all 3 analysts had to agree, first of all, the coding that they were giving it agreed, and then we compared that back against what the automated tool had done. Now, the best tool was accurate 62% of the time, and the worst performer was under 30% of the time. Now, if you think about that, all we're asking them there is favourable, neutral, or unfavourable. There's a 1 in 3 chance of just getting that right. So if they just guessed, they would have been more accurate. And in fact, loads of content online tends to be neutral anyway. So if us lot, knowing that, had just coded it all as neutral, we would have thrashed that automated provider just by doing that. Would have been right about 60% of the time ourselves. Now, there is a war going on at the moment between all of these different platforms, and their salespeople are claiming higher and higher rates. And I have heard accuracy levels claimed up in the sort of 90-95% accurate for tone. I do not believe it, and I say that with respect. I know that some of the social media monitoring companies are here, but I'd be more than happy to have that conversation and to see it in action, but I do not possibly believe that anybody is up in the 90-95%. I know a lot of the MDs of the companies personally, and when they're talking privately with me, they admit the number's far closer to 70%. And of course, the reason is it's context, it's sarcasm, it's shortened words, it's all these things. It's a hellishly difficult job. I'm not saying it will never be better. I think it will. The speed that computers improve, with network computing as well, I'm sure it's bound to improve, but it's not there yet to base to trust your favourability analysis to it. So, big problem there with consistency across these different providers. Now, if that's the case, then a load of the metrics of the old days, the metrics that I would dare to suggest that most of us have built our businesses upon, aren't going to work anymore. So I talked about volumes. How can we trust volumes in any of this stuff if we know that these different providers are all producing different numbers? Interestingly, in the old days of Metrica, and when we used to have just the mainstream media, we used to get that sack of mail. Durrance or Ramaiki or whoever would send us the clips. We'd wait 5 days for the regional press to come in. So we'd wait in the post for a couple of days, because sometimes the press cutting companies are a bit mean and they'd send it second class. So we'd wait a couple of days longer for that. So we'd have a cut-off period to allow the content in. Then we'd send it off to our analyst. Our analyst would leisurely analyse it over about a week or 10 days, send it back to us, and then we'd write the report over the next 2 or 3 days. And a typical, a June report would be delivered to the client, so July the 25th, 26th, 27th, always the worst week of the month, that week, and I'm sure many of you will recognise that. But in social media and online media, where is our cut-off period? If we were going to measure how effective this conference is, where would we stop looking at tweets and blog posts? Would we just measure it today? Or would we wait a week? So where is that cut-off period? And so what cut-off period do we feed into our measurement program? And so therefore, is this concept of absolute numbers remotely relevant? It's a rhetorical question. AVEs, I'm going to throw out there. We know, all of us in this room know that they were never a great measure. They were never a relevant measure. They're even less so now. An online AVE, I'm not even going to ask a show of hands of who tries to offer one, but hopefully you'll all at least acknowledge how difficult they are to create, because basically you can't do it properly. That is the simple fact. And when clients ask for online AVEs, they're asking something even more polluted than a traditional AVE. And then one of the ways that we like to move the thought process of clients towards things more credible is to help them think about, well, look, how many people did you reach? How many eyeballs, impressions, opportunities to see? Those type of words you'll probably be using, did we get? Well, in online and social media, that's basically impossible to measure accurately as well. And I'm talking about accurately with an absolute number. So you may have seen the research that came out from Facebook a couple of weeks ago saying that a brand, on average, will have its content that it posts, 16% of its fans will see that content. So you can't count every fan. So, okay, you say, well, look, Facebook themselves have told us this, so I'm going to count 16%. But then somebody came out and said, well, actually, no, that's wrong as well. And if you read what Facebook posted accurately, actually, it's only 8%. So there's a difference there between academics on this, between 8% and 16%. The fact is, you're modelling, you're making a guess, you're bodging a number, and that number only gets bodged more and more and more until it reaches a point where it's probably meaningless. It's certainly not accurate. You certainly can't have it accurate to an exact number. You could say about this many people, perhaps. So, another question. Are all these old metrics appropriate? What about the way communications has changed? So the old world of communications, a brand had a crisis, and it would put out an advert, it would communicate its messages, and it would instruct its PR people to deliver these messages, and we're sorry, or whatever the message was, and it was a top-down form of communication. It doesn't work anymore. It's now about conversations. You don't deliver a message in a conversation, you have a chat. It's a two-way process. So there's a thought. Are even measuring messages appropriate in social media? Just throw it out there as a question. So, what about the new metrics? Well, unfortunately, we've got to watch these too. So, there's a whole load of new things, particularly of note is people saying, please help me find the influencers. So let's have a show of hands for this. Who has clients saying, can you please help me identify influencers? I expect to see most of the room's hands go up. And I see probably 2/3. If you could just find me this one influencer who's going to help me make my content go viral, that would be fantastic. And so we all run around wondering how on earth we're going to do that. And there are different tools that exist that claim to do it. So things like Clout and Cred and Peer Index, you've probably heard of them. And Clout gives a score of 0 to 100, and the closer you get to 100, the more influential you are. And until recently, Clout had Justin Bieber as the most influential person on Clout with a score of 100, and it had Barack Obama beneath him. This caused much mirth and amusement in the industry, and they've changed their algorithm. And to be fair to Clout, they change their algorithm all of the time, and it's getting more and more relevant, I guess you might say. And they now have Barack Obama as more influential than Justin Bieber. But it still does odd things. So the Big Ben clock in London, famous tourist zone, it tweets on the hour, every hour, and it tweets the time. It's an automated bot. And now I have a Clout score of 59 or 60 or something. I'm quite proud of that. It's not too bad a score, but I'm beaten by a bot. Something that doesn't ever say anything apart from the words bong, bong, bong when it says the time. And because of this, Clout says it's incredibly influential about drugs. So if you wanted to do a drug awareness campaign, Clout would be suggesting to you that you should be trying to get the Big Ben clock to do some of your... So I know many of my American friends in the audience. When I've been at conferences over there, the people that they tend to give a big up to is a company called Tracker, Tracker come about this in a different way. It's still an automated tool, but it builds relevance, reach, and resonance. And Tracker actually tweeted out to us, I don't know if you've seen it, if you're following along on the conference hashtag, they've built an influencer list and a sort of social monitoring tool of the conversations going on here. And if if you contact their chief exec, he will give you access to it. So go and find the tweet and send him a message, and he'll do that. Incidentally, Klaus also said that I was influential about photography and pizza, which I thought was interesting. So I never tweeted about either, although I do look like I eat too many pizzas, I admit. But I don't think Klaus knows that. Okay, so I've painted this disastrous scene. Like, what on earth are we going to do? It's all a disaster. Everything we used to do doesn't work anymore. Oh my God, run for the hills. But the good news is that actually the more things have changed, the more things have stayed the same. And it's up to all of us in this room as the leaders in the measurement space to go out there around the world and to preach this message, that there's no need to panic. It's business as usual, but just think about it in a slightly different way. So any high-performing PR organization, agency, in-house team is going to say to itself, what are my organization's goals? What are my organization's objectives? What are the KPIs of my organization? Once it understands that, it's going to say, okay, how do my PR goals and my PR objectives link to that? Right? They've got to link what they're trying to do back to what their organization's trying to do. And only when we're here can they then think about their objectives. And that's where we've had conversations galore about this today. We've got to understand the client's objectives, and then we build our measurement program. Now, I assume and hope that most of us in this room have been doing that for a long time. So I say the more things change, the more they stay the same. Well, how would that look in social media? Here is how you ought to think about it. So the organizational goals, their big picture, what they want to do, their objectives. You map the social media goals and the objectives. Then when you understand that, the strategy, and then the tactics. Andy West was saying, objectives aren't strategy. Of course they're not. Objectives should, by default, always be measurable. I always think measurable objectives is just using one word too many. Every objective should be measurable. Strategy, someone once said to me, strategy is everything that happens above the shoulders, and tactics is everything that happens beneath the shoulders. And I think that's quite a nice way of thinking about it. But if you follow this process here, only at this point should our clients then be thinking about, right, what is the appropriate way to monitor and to measure and to prove my success on this? And the problem that we have as an industry, that's our strength, right? Tailored analytics is our strength. The problem that we have is that the clients don't come in here, they come in up here. No, I beg your pardon, they come in here and they don't come in out here, so I got that the wrong way around. They come in here, they go, we're going to do social media, we're going to go on Facebook, we're going to have a blog, we're going to tweet, and we're going to buy Radian 6, or we're going to buy another one of those tools. So they come in here, and then they start thinking about, well, why are we going to do all of this? And then they don't understand why the tool that they've got doesn't help them measure their success. So we have this big education job to do. It's my biggest hobby horse. We have to go out there and educate people. This stuff is not difficult. You just need to think about it right. You have to go through this process. You have to start out here. When you get down here, that is when you choose one of our tools. And we all differentiate ourselves on the different ways. I've heard it in session after session on how to help people choose the right tools and the right service. But it's education, but it's also confusion that is rife in the industry, and I've heard that again and again, and obviously I haven't been in the same sessions as everybody else, but I suspect that if you're in a different one from me, you're probably hearing a similar type thing. Certainly I've been following the Twitter streams. And this is what AMEC has done, and you'll be pleased to know as AMEC members what we've been up to. So the social media measurement group, we have worked with the Conclave. Now, the Conclave deliberately is not a group of only PR measurement organizations. First of all, it represents global, it represents clients, a lot of experts in the States, but other cross-discipline organizations as well. Social media isn't owned only by the PR discipline, it's owned by other disciplines too. So it's important that we've worked with other trade bodies as well. So people like the IAB, Comscore, Nielsen, the Web Analytics Association, the Media Ratings Council, a whole load of very bright people from great organizations have come together and come up under the conclave, which we have worked towards through the social media measurement group. We've worked to help them to come up with these 5 core areas here. First of all, content sourcing and methods. You remember last year we came up with the methodology table, and if you're not using it in your reports yet, I'd urge you please to go back to AMEC's website. You'll find it under the social media measurement tab. Download it. It's there for you to download and put into your report. It's a way of just being transparent about what it is that we're doing. Where are we getting our content from? We appreciate that you're going to need to have numbers in your report. Well, let's make sure that if I buy a report from Kantar, I understand by the numbers, and it might be different than if I buy a report from Revolver or whoever it might be. Because I can look, my client can look in the methodology table and they can see, okay, well, Kantar sourced their content from wherever, and Revolver and Revolver sourced their content from there. So that's going to help me understand it. But then these areas as well, we need to have some standards around these. So some great work has been done, and some of the American colleagues who've worked on that are in the back of the room. So there's going to be more on this coming out. There's a website, smmstandards.org, and it also has its own hashtag on Twitter as well. So go and read about it on there. It's all documented on there. The standards have been put out for approval, for comment, and literally we're just coming to the end of this process, but they're all there for you to go and take a look at. And they've been done with the full understanding that all of us need to compete. Now, having done that, so that we get a consistency and we can remove confusion from our clients, how might it look if we were going to bring this into a measurement program? Well, this on the right here is what many of you will know as the marketing funnel. Again, we heard the lady from the Cleveland Clinic saying she wanted to move beyond awareness, and she wanted to move her people down towards consideration and choosing to when if they're ill, to go to her clinic to get fixed. So you're taking people from awareness, knowledge, consideration, preference, action. How might that look if I go back, with these 5 broad areas of standards? Well, we've got exposure, engagement, influence, impact, and advocacy. In other words, recommendation. And then, well, okay, I kind of can see that. That kind of makes sense. But how on earth would I measure that in one of my reports? So Don Bartholomew is going to talk to us. I'm giving us a little sneak preview, as I said, about from Friday. But these are the type of things that we do. And you can see it's a circle that should really feed around. Measurement should never be something that is just looking backwards. You're wasting 50% of your budget if that's all you ever use it for. Measurement, if it's done properly, you should be able to feed into your planning process to then improve what you're doing. So it's always about a circle. And you can see we've populated on here some of the type of metrics that may or may not fit in for different clients. Now, guess what? Not all of these are appropriate for every client. It's going to depend. The greatest news about our industry is that we can look anyone in the eye, and when they ask us a question, normally the answer is, it depends. And it does depend, because it depends on what they're trying to do. But these are the type of metrics that we might want to fit in there. And Don is going to take this further, as I say, on Friday. One of the most successful things I think that AMEC has done in its time was the original valid metrics framework that we came up with a few years ago. One of its problems, though, was it didn't really work in the way that it was designed for social media. So the group and I have been working on it over this year, and big thanks to all of my industry colleagues who've helped on that. And Don's going to unveil a new social media valid metrics framework that you'll all be able to use. And the beauty of it is, it's not you have to do this and you have to use only these metrics and therefore half of us are going to go out of business. It's all about acknowledging that we need to use those standards, we need to use the common approach, the common methodology, but the framework itself isn't a standard. It's a way of shaping this measurement to make it make sense, and you'll see more on Friday. I think it's fantastic, and I don't know if Don's in the room, but is Don here? But his clarity of thinking on this type of stuff is superb, and so we all owe him a big debt of thanks, which you'll see on Friday. The last thing I wanted to share here today is to talk about a case study. So when I was at Gorkana, we worked with a number of big US accounts, And I had one of those, I'm sure many of you will sympathise and empathise with me in the room, one of those horrible moments when a client phoned me up and said, hey, we know you work with this other client, we think they're brilliant, and they've got a best practice measurement program. We want to meet in California and discuss the measurement that you do for us with each other. By the way, you're in London and it's at midnight. Can you join us on the phone? So I know, oh my God, two really big clients talking about us and we're not even in the room. But anyway, I did join the call, and what was really nice was one of the clients explaining what they did and how they thought about it to the other client. Basically, I've taken her slides to show it as a case study. So how does a client think about the way that they do their social media measurement? So this is what she said, and we had this point in one of the sessions earlier as well. She said, look, we look at our social media sort of influencers, if you like, within our own business, the people that matter, at three levels. There's the practitioners, the people doing the grunt work, the people who control the budget, and then the senior execs as well. And each of these levels need to get some form of measurement from us, telling them what we're doing. Then they said, well, look, what are the metrics that matter to these different levels? And we had this in a session earlier today. If you're just pumping out one report to a client, you might be doing the wrong thing. I mean, do think about this, right? Your PR manager, or whoever you're sending the report to, might like the report that you're getting. But if they're then sending it up to the board might, of course they haven't got enough time to read that. Right, so you might want to be thinking about doing a top-level report. But what about if they're sending it to the person who's actually engaging in social media? They might need to see a lot more detail. So you need to think about these different levels within an organisation and make sure that you represent the information that they all need. So these are the people, and these are the different metrics that they see. And then they thought about, well, how is it that social media fits within our business? And I mentioned earlier, of course, that PR isn't the only stakeholder inside a business for social media. There's others. So this is how that client sees it. So you've got the social channels and programs, this big red circle in the middle here. You've got PR and comms up here, but then we've got marketing and e-commerce over on the right. We've got customer service and support down at the bottom, and we've got product and process innovation. So each of these teams have an important part to play in social media. So how does this company measure? Well, they do different measurement for those different disciplines. So, the marketing measurement, where we sit, really, they've got search, they've got media, email, homepage, market research surveys, they track fans and followers, SEO, we've got awareness over here, conversation advocacy, and blah, blah, blah. I think that's a nice metrics in here, like resolution rate. Resolution time, efficiencies that they can that social media brings to their product development process as well. So this is how an actual client, and I think you should be asking your clients these kind of questions. Go beyond just thinking about what is it that the PR person wants. I mean, I guess only ask them if you feel that you can help in these areas, but I know that some of you work across far more than just measuring content and look at measuring measuring other stuff as well, more market research type stuff. Barry, I've said to Barry he can share the slides, by the way, so they'll all be available for download later. This is nice. I talk about a framework. What they've done here is they've taken different objectives, which are listed here. Again, sorry that it's difficult to read, but awareness, engagement, lead generation, demand generation, conversion, customer support, advocacy, and product innovation. So real business objectives there. And then they said, well, what are the key performance indicators? What are the things that we can measure for each of these? So they've built up this, basically, valid metric framework tailored against their objectives. And that's what I would love to see this industry start doing. And I would ask you all to think, how can you help your clients with this? Because appropriate metrics drive the right behavior. I had a bit of a laugh with Katie Payne on Twitter today. I don't know if you saw Asim has got a brilliant bit of software where he tweeted it out to us all saying, here's a dashboard showing the number of tweets that are coming out of the conference. It was all very interesting. And Katie tweeted from America, well, yeah, but what about the outcomes or something? And of course, poor old Asim's dashboard's not, what is the outcome from this conference anyway? But it seems dashboard's not going to be able to get that. But businesses care about these outcomes, these objectives, and it's really important to think about that and how you're going to measure it. And then, just back to that point about reporting, this is what they do in their reporting. So you remember those different levels. Each different level within their organisation gets very different reports and different information. So you can see the social media team, they get dynamic dashboards, real-time information, wrap-up reports, whereas the exec just gets a top line, a KPI report. They get insight summaries, great detail, cutting through the clutter to tell them the content that really matters. This comes frequently to them. They get campaign reports as well as ongoing monthly reports. And this is all tailored to what they want. And we all, I think, pay a lot of lip service to tailoring measurement to what clients want. But we're driven by the need to make operational efficiencies and to standardize processes and that kind of stuff to make our businesses efficient and effective. But we're not going to help our clients in the best possible way if that's what we do. We have to shape, tailor, we have to listen, advise, consult, and build a measurement program to them. Otherwise, there's nothing to differentiate ourselves from the platforms, all those 226 of them, which are just on a commoditization route to the bottom. So just to wrap up, I've got a couple of final thoughts on this. So 3 takeaways, sort of digesting what I've said, if you like. Automation, I've kind of put the boot in, haven't I? So these numbers don't mean much and they're not tailored and blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying don't use automation. There is a valid place for automation in real-time monitoring and measuring, but you have to use it with caution and just make sure that you're able to explain to your client what its benefits are and what its drawbacks are. Insist on using the right language as well. For too long as an industry, we have all used words interchangeably. We talked about OTS when we've meant reach or impressions. We've got to start speaking the same language. And the IPR in the US and AMEC ourselves, we have a glossary of standard terms. It's on AMEC's website. Again, it's under the social media section. Go and have a look at it and make sure that you're using the terms correctly. To monitor and measure appropriately, just use that automation with caution and focus your clients and yourselves on the metrics that matter. Don't get tempted to sort of go down a route of just reporting everything in absolute numbers, because 9 times out of 10, if you really question those numbers, you're going to get more questions than answers. And social media measurement needs more than just numbers. It needs relevance, it needs context, it needs insight, and that's the great opportunity for us. That's our job. One of our biggest jobs is to help people not find more content, but cut through the clutter and find the content that matters. And that's a skill. That's not something a tool can do very easily. And even if it is something a tool can do, it's a tool that needs driving the whole time. And that surely is the opportunity for the people in this room. And then my sort of concluding points, I guess, is, I said that the more things have changed, the more they've stayed the same. So not just social media takeaways, but general PR measurement takeaways. I've been doing this for 18 years, and nothing's really changed in terms of big picture stuff. You've got to tie your measurement to objectives. We all know that. But if you're not doing it, you're not measuring, you're just monitoring. And, with respect, guys, we're not FIBEP, we're AMEC. We're measurement consultants. We must make sure our clients' monitoring is tied to measurement. Now, I know FIBEP and AMEC might become one thing, and I hope that they do, because the guys at FIBEP are smart people. They're working towards helping their clients with that. I would welcome them. But we're not about monitoring. You're only monitoring if you do not tie your measurement to objectives. Objectives, we've heard it many times, they need to be smart, they need to be time-bound, they need to be measurable. If they're not objectives. They are basically just a wish. You're never going to achieve it if you don't have an objective. I never achieve any personal thing in my life without setting a clear objective to myself. You know, I must tidy my bedroom. I've got married and I've now got a wife who does it for me. It's brilliant. But before I got a wife, that was my objective. Come on, joke. I know it's late in the day. She's French. She's very strict with me. She would never tidy my room. I wish she would. It's our room. I must call it our room. There you go. And this point, I've only been married like 2 weeks. I mean, come on, give me a break. 45 years and I suddenly got married. That was a nervous quiver. And the lady from the Cleveland Clinic again, brilliant. She said, suddenly, thanks to Dr. Rockland, I don't know if he's in the room, she's stopped fearing measurement. She's inspired by it. She loves it. And that is the message I go out to clients and I try to get across to them. Stop fearing it. None of us in this room are schoolmasters, come in to mark your work and tell you haven't done very well. That's not what we're about. We're there to help our clients with information that's valuable, that they can feed into their planning process, that can really give them that aha moment, as we heard it described earlier today, and help put them on the right way. And they should relish it and love it, embrace it, not fear it. And it was great to hear. That lady say that. So that's it from me. I do have a couple of announcements to make before I finish. But I mean, are there any questions? Does anyone want to make some points? Anyone think that any questions to what I've taken us through today? There's a question from Jenny. I was about to say, not you, Philip. I know Philip always asks really difficult questions, so I was going to ban him. Jenny, yes. Jenny Chapman from Gorkana.
So you mentioned earlier about having to go to the site and look at the glossary that you've put together with AMIC. Mm-hmm. What's the plan to make that the standard? So every report, if you have an AMIC stamp on your presentations that you're a member, that gets included. So,
at the moment, some of the terms on that are slightly different than the ones on the IPR, which is the Institute for Public Relations, which is the American trade body for the benefit of everyone else here. They also have a definition of terms. Some of them are slightly different. So we're working through the conclave to make sure that they're consistent and that they're agreed. But the terminology then feeds into the 5 categories of metrics that the standards are being produced upon at the moment. And then, of course, there's also the methodology table into which you feed the relevant information, which is finished and is on AMIC's website for download. Question at the back, gentleman at the back.
So maybe just to have a hands-on example of what you would suggest with the problem that you correctly identified of having these samples that are not very accurate because either they are missing things, because the tool is not good, or because your query is not good. But you have to make a report at one point, and you only have what you have. So how do you suggest going about it when you know that the data you have is not completely accurate, but does it mean
but you have to have charts and you have to have some numbers in there, so what on earth do you do? Well, I think you need to use it with caution. I think perhaps rounding numbers up rather than allowing your account executive to talk specifics. When you see something saying this tweet was seen by 1,129,872 people, that's not the case. So to watch for that kind of language. And I think also surely it's more about looking at trends now than absolute numbers as well. So is there a propulsion up or down? And I had an interesting conversation with someone last night from the lady, Antonia from UNICEF, who was saying, well, of course, if you do a report and you say, well, we got this many more tweets than last year, at first glance that looks good, but of course more people are online and there are more people tweeting now than last year, and we've got more followers than we had last year. So does that really mean anything? I don't know. I mean, all of this stuff throws up so many questions. But you've then got to say, well, look, what is the objective that this client is trying to do? Is their objective lots of tweets? And if it is, that number might be useful to them. But I'm sure that's not really the objective. The objective is about more than that, isn't it? It's about, do you remember we looked at some of the ideas of it, like driving people to a website or increasing awareness or whatever it might be. So then start to look at measuring those things and looking to correlate or do some market mix modelling depending on the level of sophistication and budgets that the client's got to say, well, can we see whether this is actually driving that genuine and real objective? Any more questions? So, okay. I thought I'd banned you.
Firstly, very entertaining presentation so far, Richard. Independence, it seems to suit you. You wear it well. No, I'm going to ask. It's really this question that if we, to understand what success looks like in social, we encourage clients to define it in the context of their business objectives or their own unique objectives. A lot of clients can't resist competitor benchmarking. But if one of our founding principles is the context is your unique objectives, and if we assume that each company has different objectives, what are the implications? How do you then, explain to a client what we're going to use for competitor benchmarking? Because of course the competitors do not have your objectives. They've got their own, they're different. We don't know what they are.
Yeah.
So what does, are they doing a good job?
Yeah.
How could you say to Kantar
Yeah.
whether Gorkana's doing a good job? Because I don't know what Gorkana's
Nor do I.
strategy is. This is why we can talk openly about these things. No, do you see what my point is? That to some clients, what we're saying will sound like a bit of a cop-out.
Yeah.
Like we're just turning it back to
Do you think?
In a way.
I mean, I think with the competitors, often clients also ask for aspirational or peer group competitors. So, Shell will say, can you show us how we're doing compared to McDonald's? And, obviously they're not competitors at all. I've always advised clients that, first of all, get your own house in order and then worry about looking at the competitor set. Obviously, as practitioners, we all want them to do competitive analysis because, let's face it, we make more money if they do. But the most important thing that a client should do is look at their own metrics. Now, I thought where you were going to go with that question is, are the social media objectives really tied to the business objectives, or are you smoking dope on that? And I can see a bit of a link there. But I think the important thing, if we say you must be very clear about your social media objectives, and then make sure what we're helping them to measure fit to that, then we're 9/10 of the way there. In terms of competitors, I totally take your point. It does depend on those objectives, but most of the time, I've found competitors really only want to know more of a benchmark, a litmus test of how are we doing in terms of volumes. We want some kind of volume test. And there, as long as you're using a consistent data set, it doesn't matter if that data set is company A, B, or C from our test. It's going to be presenting its proportion of content that it finds, but that will be consistent. So any differences and any trends will be meaningful information if that's what they value. If I was a client, I don't think I'd be spending too much time right now worrying about my competitors. I'd be far more focused on myself.
Thanks very much.
Yes, lady here.
Thank you, Philip. Hi, Richard. Marion from Ogilvy.
Hi, Marion.
One of the challenges I'm finding in getting clients to set proper social media objectives is getting the right stakeholders in the room.
Right.
By that I mean if it's marketing who holds the budget
Right.
and is briefing the agency on what they want out of social media, their objectives look like things like fans and engagement and so on. But suddenly if you talk to customer service, the objectives of social media are very different.
Right.
Suddenly if you talk to procurement, they're around lowering costs of marketing communications.
Right.
If you talk to sales team, it's around lead generation. But those people aren't paying the bill to the agency quite often, the social media agency. How do you go about, and you have any special process around bringing those correct stakeholders together, even when they're not paying the bill for the agency, to set the right objectives that are going to drive business for the organization?
Yeah. That's a great question. When I was with Gorkana, the most refreshing meetings we had were the ones where we had clients that really got that. And I can think of one of the mobile phone operators that we went to see, and they had a room of 15, 16 people in the room to meet us, and they had people from their ad agency, their digital agency, from the customer service team at the company, and we were with them for the whole day, working out what were the different metrics that mattered. And then they got a very detailed report which included metrics for each of those different departments. I mean, one area is that you might need to have real discipline, because if you know, ultimately it's about shaping the measurement to the person that's paying us right now. So if it's the communications team, you want to make sure that it's the communication team's objectives, which of course are different from those other people's objectives that are reflected in the report. If the other people want some, maybe there's a business growth opportunity that you can upsell the services to giving them their separate reports. And we think back to the case study I showed, and the way that IT company thinks about it is the different departments need different metrics and different information in their reports. And I think that this also speaks to a challenge that we all face, which is that PR is changing. There is no doubt about it. PR is changing. It is being forced to work far more closely with other marketing disciplines than it's ever done before. There's a very real chance that in 10, 20 years, perhaps PR as an independent discipline may not even exist. There's a very smart chap who was here last year called Philip Sheldrake, who wrote a book called The Business of Influence. And Philip suggests that in the future we'll have influence professionals who will have a much wider skill set than just the PR people. So they'll have digital, video, advertising, all these different skills. And that is what, you know, the PR students of today should be being taught. Maybe in the future it'll be different, but right now I think we need to focus on it, like I said. Okay, so I'm going to take the opportunity to thank all of you. I know it's been an incredibly long day, but thank goodness we were only an hour. But I'm grateful to you all for coming into the room and for listening to it. I hope it's useful. Do try and be here on Friday morning. As I say, we've got Don Bartholomew. I'm going to introduce him basically and just set a bit of the scene. But Don is incredibly smart. We've got a fabulous framework. I would urge you all, please, to go away and use it after Friday. It will be available for download on the website. Don's arrived today. He's a bit jet lagged, but he is around tonight. And that leads me to my point, which is that Philip and his colleagues from Kantar have very generously, and we've talked today about the importance of the sponsors, how much they matter to these conferences and helping us all have our nice food and nice drinks. Well, the great news is that we can benchmark our competitor by the quality of the drinks that he provides tonight. And drinks are on Kantar Media, for which we're all enormously grateful. They're going to be on the roof, so those kind people will show us back to the list, up to the roof at 6:30. So it's drinks 6:30 till 8 p.m. on the roof. It's going to be beautiful up there. There's going to be, there's going to be some great scenery and some nice things to see. So if you've got a camera, bring it with you. You might be able to get some nice pictures. And I'll look forward to seeing you up there. And with thanks to the sponsor, thanks to all of you for your attention and for coming to my session today. Thank you.